Yeah, all right. And so, Rinpoche, first of all, thank you for the teachings, for everything. I'm going to make it slightly shorter. And so, there were basically 3 questions. The first one, and they're all related to each other, to what Rinpoche taught yesterday. So, Rinpoche spoke about the 3 principal aspects of the path: renunciation, the mind of enlightenment, and emptiness. Now, the question is relating to the cultivation of the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta. How can we develop full bodhicitta without thinking or meditating on dependent arising? In a sense that we can develop compassion and sense of maybe some sense of bodhicitta and focusing on the people that are related to us, close ones and so forth. But to develop bodhicitta, we need to think of all sentient beings without exceptions and how we are related to them, we are dependent on them. And so, though the teaching on emptiness comes last, it seems that still, without thinking of dependent arising, we won't be able to develop a sense of bodhicitta, particularly since we also need to consider all living beings as having been a mother. So really, without thinking of dependent arising, can we develop a full sense of bodhicitta? So that's the first question. The second question, we mentioned self-grasping and self-cherishing, which in some sense seem to be quite similar to each other. So could Rinpoche
hold on to the first
my
one.
horses.
Hold your horse.
I'm holding my horses. All my horses. Stay at bay.
The first one is, I think many people does have the same question. Tani pyoge nalosha.
Listen.
Samin yorba, samin duwa.
Lord Simon is here.
Yeah. Okay. Jezanta nyen la ya ninjungi sambadi ya wo jige yongdu kasang nyen la ninjungi sambadi shukchimbo jige yongdu zambe rang dungye la ya cheju yue da me se thokwa de changma selje tanga dungye de cheju yue ba ninzen kundu ne tarba tönyen gi loji gen dus de de ka che ninjung sin de ko ya gyoshi geba zamshi mare tingyen la nyabche deke sabe shugula 아니 마당 신당 만주는 좋아 간지지 임베 있나야 대다 담지 능에면 되바 대화되바 직바 디랑 아주 그 말에 남상하고요. 가로가로 냠도 다신 냠바세에 대 오즈 용도 디가 다 다신 냠바 용데 갑라 정신기 다신 단다디 규제명아 되는 신체제 아니 마치뇨아 아니 거진 여바 거진 삽고바 참아 레원도 전배 아니 가란주 녀야다 심슈드 마소네 카릴릭 말스도 닝지 친구께 답셰디 또좀 마체나 녀는 닝지 친구께 여바도 슈 공배도 공마단체 동기도 왜 싫어도 녀를 슈 다위나 딘중당 동반이들 냠도 조그래야 돼 동바도 딘중이도 슈거로 슈슈슈 잡 아니 닝지기 너버데 또 아주 충중요래 충중요버디 강라 가지고 배 슈충부지 동반이가 슈슈 잡대베이나 창마를 쓰입니다 망체지라 교양 가르리를 세도 땅 마란 탈바 톱난 딕설의 신심진 탐지등이 체두사 말에 세야 등 아주 시가 등리요다 내 인도 잠배 간저기 탈바 톱집이 탈바 톱이기 지기 삼로디 슈충부 년중간을 레차도 잠배 덴디지기 탈바 톱이기 교디 가르치고 담에도 쉐러를 될때네 제고도 잠배 아니 셈게베 갑라야 베나 부중중지 럽라로 줘베 갑라 파만지가 럽지 대원도 잠배 결혼 럽종 장제 미 가르쳐 버렸어도 결혼 그 또그지다 결혼 기부 중앙 삼식 팽금하래 계급 외쳐도 럽종 장고 계급 열기 당해서 럽종 장고다 슬랍도 잠배 럽종 장이지 버려 이나야 심슈게당 로가로스 제장가 딘디기 차네 다들 제르비치게 남손남손 나로라 당고 년중도 손사베시고 전주 셈데 깨고야디 내가 디강 토제봐 되니 슈디다 니중예네레 찬주스면 슈 잡사 가가간 게그서는 안 된중다 동반이가는 대외 인버 이마도 도사요 얘네 심슈 깨마지 계자들 개바 침으로 세상가 심슈 깨베셔도 딜레브레스 전주심 친이 상마진이 끼그리 끼 말은 다티 깨져 신내셔요다 얘네야 닝지 전부 깨베 단다 전주심 깨고래 세 랍자디 닝지 전부 깨고래 전주심 깨고래 랍자를 만도 전주심 친이 상이 깨베게 적게 말했어
이제 그런 대화들이 민주시 못한 천주기 쌤 계획이 체주 테스트 텐중기 삼바테스 상고거를
텐조
텐중기 삼바
닝중 삼바 어디도 거래 닝중 삼바도 거봐
텐중
텐중 어디도 거래 텐중당 동년이 냠도 거봐 카풀로 줄로를 줄고
So in relation to this question about whether the sort of understanding of emptiness or dependent origination, we can sort of group the emptiness and dependent origination together for the purposes of this point here, that whether it's required in order to whether we should have the understanding of emptiness in order to develop the renunciation, so it should come before the bodhicitta. The emptiness should come before the bodhicitta. Well, here, when we, in the sort of text like the three principal aspects of the path, where we talk about renunciation with the thought, this strong thought that myself be free from suffering, and then sort of examining whether that is actually possible, and then developing a clear sort of ascertainment that it is clearing away our doubts that it's possible, and understanding that that it is possible to do that, and therefore developing that strong wish to day and night to be liberated from our suffering, which is not just a disgust for samsara, but a very sort of active wish for the liberation. That's the moment when we sort of develop our renunciation. But then, of course, that's just a perspective based around just ourselves, and then if we start to sort of widen out our sort of field of view, so that we're not just encompassing ourselves, but encompassing other beings, and indeed all the other transmigratory beings, and understanding that they're exactly the same as us for the reasons that we've already discussed. They're in the same position as us, and then sort of start to cultivate the idea of cultivating the idea of bodhicitta. We talked about the 7-point cause and effect instruction, but also there's the instruction on the equalizing and exchange of self and others, which is also, to some extent, grounded very much in those three sort of first points, the first 3 points of the 7-point cause and effect instruction, where it talks about knowing as understanding that there's no sentient being who has not acted as our mothers at some point, considering the kindness that they have, the sentient beings have paid to us, and then wishing to repay that kindness. And sort of developing a sense of closeness and affection, and not necessarily developing a full-blown great compassion, but sort of getting a real sense of closeness and feeling for other beings. And we really sort of some sort of sense of that is really required if we're going to actually meditate on emptiness. As I say, we can put together the emptiness and dependent origination, and understanding them and developing the wisdom to understand emptiness and dependent origination is one thing. But if we just make effort with our own currently very small compassion, and we just make effort sort of dive headlong into the subject of emptiness and dependent origination, and I think many people have this fault, actually, because deep inside of us we really have, he's sort of hidden away, we really have this wish, I want to get, I want the best for me, I want to be liberated myself, and actually not really worrying too much about others, then our efforts to understand and to develop that wisdom, understanding emptiness and dependent origination, will not be, very productive. And so, even in terms of even in terms of developing the liberation, the mind of liberation, and wishing to understand emptiness, that all of those really need a sort of underpinning of some form of compassion. For instance, it doesn't have to be the sort of full-blown, authentic, great compassion or bodhicitta, but it has to, have some sort of basis. For instance, when a parent sends a child to a school, sometimes they sort of, if they give them sort of good advice, they will sort of say, what's the aim of you going to school? What's the purpose of you going to school? And they'll sort of encourage them to not just think about themselves, and they're doing the studies for themselves, but actually to think of whether these studies could be of benefit to the country. So this sort of wider context. The study is the same, but then they have a sort of wider aim or perspective to not just improve themselves educationally, but also to be able to contribute to their country. So this, what you have is a kind of enthusiasm or power of the mind which drives us, and that underlying drive is a drive of compassion, whether it's authentic bodhicitta or compassion or not, but some sense of the wish, welfare of others, which underpins this whole process.
So the second question was about the relation or differences between self-cherishing and self-grasping. It seems that there's somewhat maybe a similarity between them. So what are the differences between the two?
Self-grasping and self-cherishing. Our urgent problem is self-grasping. And self-cherishing, it looks like, through a bit of research, it shows that self-cherishing is an imprint of the self-grasping. What is one of the example of the very subtle sign of there is a stain of self-grasping of the Bodhisattva? The stain, the imprint, where Buddha says self-cherishing, is that one slightly motivation to motivate to help others is a sign of self-cherishing. Sounds, wow, what does that mean? So motivation is a sign of that person has to have a put effort. Saying like, today I'm going to benefit that being. I'm so happy. This even little bit of motivation is a self-cherishing, but not self-grasping. Because even the person who has reached liberation, no more suffering, they all did meditation, directly realization, of course, no grasping at all, but that cherishing, sign of the cherishing is there. So the sign of a grasping, but it's not considered as a grasping. It's called self-cherishing. So grasping, it's more like still it has a strong zimba or lo chinjilogi lo chinjilo shu chimbu ngondo gyudbe tendere ba.
It's so it has a very sort of form of kind of grasping or clinging sort of apprehension, which is informed by a completely inverted way of thinking.
That's a very quick task.
Yes, she thought that was very fast for everything he'd said. But Yaki was just translating that small.
네 심증이 된 제고 그냥 sample 추주지 개위네 second 개위네 다랑 데리스 랑지 생기 다르스 가진스나 굴롱구 저와 참을 때 송았어.
So actually, there's this. So the sort of point here is in terms of the self-cherishing is that the self-cherishing exists way beyond the self-grasping, because and one of the subtle signs that of self-cherishing is this sense of needing to make a sort of effort, even if it's a very, very subtle effort, so that having to sort of almost bring up the motivation in some way, that even that subtlest of efforts is actually a sign that the being still has self-cherishing. So even up to the 10th ground of the Bodhisattvas, even up to that level, they have this subtle form of self-cherishing where there's a sort of effort to, in some sense, a kind of effort to regenerate or rejuvenate their motivation. But once you get to the ultimate state of Buddhahood, then it talks about this spontaneous and effortless, the ways in which the Buddha works spontaneously and effortless for the welfare of beings, and therefore that subtle need to somehow subtly motivate oneself is gone, and that even that subtlest form of sort of self-motivation is considered as a sign of self-cherishing. And what Rinpoche said before is to do with being this sort of process being always underpinned by a kind of a completely inverted way of seeing things, so that seeing things in the kind of directly opposite way to the way that they actually exist. So this is a sort of differentiation between self-grasping and self-cherishing.
Okay, so
Now here one point. The sign, the Bodhisattva's main focus is to bring down not the self-grasping. Yes, it's a foundation to bring down self-grasping for your own good, for sure. But self-cherishing to reach out sentient being. That's the main focus of the Bodhisattva. So normally when we say His Holiness the Dalai Lama is the manifestation of a compassion Buddha. I said this, many Tibetans people say that, many devotees of His Holiness says this, because people used to say this, not because seeing some kind of what His Holiness has the quality, as normally it's described in the great the masters, the books or the scriptures, in there how it explained, how does that His Holiness does have that or not, we don't do this kind of research. When I heard from my teacher this teaching, this slight one subtle motivation, which is considered that I cannot do it, becomes like quite grasping to yourself. I cannot do it, and even you think like I need to have this, to like I need to stand up. The little slightly push is a kind of self-cherishing. When I heard this, I got like, wow, that's great teaching. But then when one time I was scrolling on Facebook, and then somebody posted His Holiness Dalai Lama in his late 60s when he was traveling abroad at that time a lot. Then one time he just reached to his hotel's lobby, and then all the the news reporters and all the people are lined up for interview. And His Holiness does that regularly. No time to go into his hotel, take a shower, and go to the lobby. No. Airport, at the airport there's a meeting, coming out in the hotel, the lobby, and then there's all the newspapers, news reporters. And on that occasion, somebody made a video that His Holiness takes a rest because he had a long day, long flight. And then he comes to the sofa that people lined up to meet him. And then he sits down and lay down on the sofa for maybe 2-3 seconds. And then he wakes up, and then the news lady says, "This is your resting?" And His Holiness says, "Yes, this is how I rest." And he laughed, it's very normal. And then he went, "You wait, I'll come back, okay?" Then he goes and do his, it's not a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. That is his journey. This is his life. And never take any vacation in his life. That's the Dalai Lama. So how could this work actually? We never investigate. So this is the power of the bodhicitta. So once bodhicitta is active, few seconds of rest is good enough. You cannot rest anymore. In these 3 seconds, you just go like this, and then the push of the compassion is there, and then he needs to move on. So that's it. I just wanted to add that one here. So,
and so Rinpoche, the third question was about accumulating merit. And so when we think, I have to accumulate merit, this is what I need to do, isn't it an impediment for accumulating merit? Like if we let it naturally occur, without having to force it to think about it, will it not arise naturally? Okay. And moreover, we're studying how to do so, and so we need to think about it. And so when we this is the plan, we have a plan to accumulate merit. So doesn't it act as an impediment for an accumulation of merit? It doesn't stand naturally, but it's something that we need to force.
The sonam sabdi, sonam di chedunine kulong jeji sagu yorbe, korang ngaranga shushu yungurbe sechirbe. Son the gig alele jowa de jena. Digi mara pena sonam sa go yegi miyu dob de karresena tappedo 시험 도 전에 아니 란줄 차샤비나 레기 톱기 아니 지기 배낭 란줄 대화라 롱죄 제도 깔리게 봉하는 참으로 답변은 우유 튼달 깔리게 원도 전에 미유디 대화 영향이 체도 미유 심 안디 체도 아니 란줄 깔리시자 무사체 아니 소소히 답변은 아직 참가하고 있으나 아니 dollar 몸지고요나 안 dollar 몸지기 체도 깔리게 원도 전에 미유디 가르쳐도 vacation time actually. Kalija 이나야 외계신데 가져자 첨부지다 아니 학바도 지 잘라녀야 돼 개주 개체야 대통화 대주기 디기 차진 루비아데 렐하르지 대나신 변한 그런 산지 유구 루비인슬라비 잠베 냐라 산지 유구디 루고에 미유 가르레스 두 잠베 닝지 유군엘랑데 신 심제 나게 타다니 베 심제 탐지기 되는데 마치는 탐미도 디가 개견데 마소는 얘기 시지르바당 아니 랑진진이 디기 알아 폼버치기도 쓰디 디메버 수여게 체도 아니 산지 유구디 원도 모주는 드마송 세게 체도 되는 아주 그 제야데 가래 야 진바당 주름소 뭐 서고 퍼진기 냠는데 다가라지 아양 빼낭아란 주기 타르바 잠시 미비나 양 소놈 싸고 유나 양 진바당 주름소 뭐 서고 뭐 삼들 다가라래 완전 미 지족의 나로를 양 지기 첨등이 야고지 용야라 양 진바당 주름소 뭐 서고 뭐 지고 지경래 내가 지고 지경래 사야 지고 지경래 된다 가르치도래 슬람나 된다 산지요 고반 토비야 쳐도 타르바 토비야 쳐도 아주 기부 용야 쳐도 지고 지냥 저는 소놈 사야디 코란을 깔리게요 말이 미유딜라야 디리 가서 미유 루비아딜라야 만조만 손에 쪼슉 치중 요매 기지들이 신 대조 상말로 깔리 따원도 깔리 제르무치 손러비지나 아니 조사립잖아요. 요즘에 세상가 제르무치기 조사립잔디 동반이던 띵중 동바 거와들 깔리케 중마송스 띵중 동바 인장 띵중 태기도 세야 될래야 아니 용하게를 거로중 거송스 딜라니 깔리 얘기 오늘 전에 조사립잔 쉽지 제비인스 가진스나 되게 좋아시고요. 네 고야게 된다라 쉽지게 되어 요즘에 조사립잔 상마디가 뽕 와 제장 상계 제도세 지구 가면 상계 고야디 배 세부서 고야디 제가 제름 붙이 납제디 배야고도 대나 신타 된진 계전다 봐 참마 다가라 봐 제장강 하란 주고 저와다 제바다 저매 간직이 용화진비네 얘랑 하란 주 미유디 기 편연다 미유 루고야기 고바 좀 센데 세워 짱마 주셔야 돼 배kä신 뭐 이러샤스 디 정보이나 아는 디 깔리켜요 말에 빼나 네 룸을 drobe이나 다람살을 네 룸날 찍dro다 잘라 칸디요 예 잘라디 니마 찍니지나 루어 말에 로단로 다와 그럼 마 조셔도 되는 야 사셔봐 사야디 카르스도 참베 하자 체타는 알 디고 고고도 알 디오 고고도 알 디오 고고도 삼로 땅땅땅땅니 아마존에 온라인 쇼핑 체다 마제 체제 다 칸도 잘라 디 잘하디조 알 칼레디 중이 두고요레 내가 로고 딜가 칼레지요 중요 말 가르전스나 년 되베 관계 알디 대화 라기 여장 얘들 상마도 루버다 딩가로 상마 집어봐 디나신 상견도 유니기 미지 선발을 닝지그 시원도 요차베 주고 데라 산지dio 고반 루디 코라 딜이야 아주 다두칼리 시부 잡딩이 손르지요데 코란도 쪼와 슈치부 시부지 디 리절트 가도 되나 삼삼 고딩이 손르지요 잠베 칼레 슈치 미용에 손르지래 양 갑갑의 용구도 아니 전주 선발 랍자 가르쳐 요르스나 산지기 양내 양도 닝지 마냠베 슈잡쇼아스 전주샘 냠 마냠세디 닝지 전부 냠 마냠강 토원도 잠베 닝지디 파르도 케체와 토마르 케체와 타마르 케체와 인도 잠베 닝지 마냠베 슈잡쇼스 랍자 양내양 정도 어떻디 아주 심슈 빠르니고 꾸롱 데다야 랑녀도 마소니 닝지디 차디샤 어데네 양 년중디야 라죠 타발 토발라 년중들이샤 한테는 정베나 그 직체도 니네 지게 아주 제대 지구열 때 깔레 매버지 된데 연구소래
So the question here is really whether, in terms of accumulating merit, whether we make a very specific sort of efforts and focus on doing that, so that in some way it's sort of contrived or sort of a little bit artificial or contrived, and that we're sort of really sort of bringing a strong effort and focus on accumulating merit, and then isn't there some sort of fault with this? That was the question, and Rinpoche said, I don't think that this is really the case, because we have to sort of think about, we can explain that through an example of thinking about why we accumulate merit and what is the purpose of doing that. And so, for instance, we, in terms of the sort of the karma that we have the for ourselves, that we wish to enjoy, we by seeing an aim of developing our happiness in our lives and the wish to sort of enjoy happiness, we do all kinds of actions. So we work hard to accumulate merit, inverted commas, or positive things in order to be able to enjoy a future result of happiness in this life. For instance, if you were to do a particular kind of work, let's say you were a doctor or something, working very hard, and then your purpose in working very hard is to be able to have at some point have a vacation, and however wonderful or whatever that vacation is, that in order to achieve that, the person has had to sort of accumulate positive conditions, and therefore has worked hard for that. That's a sort of ordinary example of how we sort of specifically work towards a particular goal. When we look at on a much, of course, deeper level of this wish to attain, say, the body of the Buddha, the bodies of the Buddha, in order to work for the ultimate welfare of all beings, and then we're inspired, and then we have to be inspired by, sustained by a mind of great compassion for all beings, because there would be no other method in order to attain that goal. And so, of course, we have to find ways to suppress and eliminate the sort of obstacles to attaining that goal, and to root out the causes of not being able to attain that goal of the self-grasping and self-cherishing. And therefore we do, and therefore, in order to, that's our aim. And then in order to achieve that aim, inspired by this great compassion, say, sort of on the Bodhisattva path, we'll engage in the practices of the various perfections, such as giving and so forth. But also, you can have practitioners who essentially are not focused on attaining the fully enlightened state endowed with the bodies of the Buddha, but wishing only to achieve liberation. And they also may engage in these practices of generosity, ethical discipline, etc., patience. They may engage in that, but their purpose may be, their aim may be only for mere liberation. And even in society, people may engage in these kinds of positive actions, such as discipline or ethical sort of generosity, in order just to achieve sort of some sense of love or happiness, comfort in this life. So you can see here that it's not actually the practices which really, and it's not, making specific effort for at practices, which is what gives the sort of flavor or taste or drive to us. It's not the practices themselves. Those are more like the methods. It's the aim which is kind of essential to us. And so we can also see this in a very clear way where Je Rinpoche, in his in the biography of Je Rinpoche, and his history, he he said that the understanding the empty nature of phenomena was not too complicated for him. But he had a real struggle understanding that because things, understanding the reasoning, the line of reasoning that said that because things are empty, therefore they must also be dependently originated or dependently related. And he couldn't get he could get a little sense of that, but he couldn't get a really strong experience of that statement that because things are empty, they must be dependently related. And so, therefore, Manjushri advised him to, do the practice, intensely engage in practices of purification, of negativity and accumulation of merit, and then, which brought the sort of inspiration or the taste of understanding that. Why understanding that those practices as just purification and accumulation of merit were needed in order to help him to proceed, to increase his understanding and wisdom. So that sort of gives us that in that history, it gives us an advice that the situations for ourselves and these other beings are the same. And what's most important is whether we have this motivation is contrived or uncontrived, is a little bit artificial or produced, or it just flows out naturally. It's the understanding of the purpose and aim for which we're doing things, and the necessity and having clear reasons about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So particularly the need, understanding the need, that's the most important thing here. So I can give you an example from my own life that I'm here in Israel, but back in my house in Dharamsala, I have a sort of an apartment, and that apartment is full of stuff, full of things that have gradually over the years kind of accumulated, and sort of this, we all do this, so. I think about, because I think of myself as so important, then I think, oh, I need this or I need that. I must have this or that. And slowly with my Amazon online shopping and other kind of ways of accumulating things, my room has become filled up with stuff. And all of that was done. The sort of underlying that is the sense of doing it for some form of happiness, to bring some sort of happiness. So, and then if we're able to see, that's a very, but I made sort of effort for happiness, and that, and so we also need to see that the wish to attain enlightenment needs to be underpinned by not just for the effort for happiness, but underpinned by a strong sense of compassion, that delight or interest, which is a sort of informed compassion which sort of delights in the wish to attain the result, and then gradually, if that, and particularly in terms of attaining enlightenment, that we have a strong underpinning of compassion, then slowly the results towards that goal will start to come. And so, but also it's very important that on the Bodhisattva path and the path towards full enlightenment, that the Buddhas give a very strong advice that the compassion is required. So this compassion has to sustain us. It's required both in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. And one of the principal important factors of the Bodhisattva path is not allowing the compassion to decline. So it's really. I often talk about how if the bodhisattvas fall from the bodhisattva path, it's because of their bodhicitta declining. But actually, what we really say is that they should never allow their compassion to decline. And so this advice of the importance of compassion and trying to attain this goal at the beginning, the middle, and the end, which helps to sustain our enthusiasm to attain the goal. Also can be said to be, for if you're wishing to attain mere liberation, would be the renunciation. And so it doesn't matter whether it's specifically done for something or not. It matters what your aim is.
the normal the question to the repeat your
Which do me do that go the lane down go to
last
vision do. That deal ya tanda di condo David Churton tendo. Or did it? Condo David Churton didn't doubt the bever chas. Pena mi rimba shuji cho back around so. Mi rimba shubi na tapena tandang around so pena ranzo 탐지 kimbe 고방을 야 슈정이 메지기 아니 지게 chanju sim dawa jawo chanju sim dawa jawo ningji dawa jawo ningji dawa jawo ninjung dawa jawo ninjung dawa jawo tsudim dawa jawo tsudim dawa jawo nyala ya 아니 샘딩 나로네 말이야 민기비 초기 말 가르뉴고도 시행라 간디스뉴고도 디삼로 땅에 주주지래 대인도 잠배 다 다당하라 추림 넘버 타고 카운트도 송예기디 아니 말 간디스 추림 마송나 간디스뉴고도 추림 송바디 말 가르 팽기도 세제도 선념시 제대로 까블야 야 추림 레슈 대비야 되당 아니 라바도 지기 가서 그래 착바디 충으로 땅에 채도 배나 직딘 취지가 삼로도도 용으로 땅대 갑델이야 톱디 간을 디냠랜 파샤체 향신에 야 직최 샴바지 년체 디 내가 디당 피기니든 저와 매바 저와 마통아체 디 파샤 향디 체팅이 손으로 다 딘제 가지고 먹고 치고 봐 세상에 제야 다음에 가르치는 리그여르데 대주 창마 가르기 체도 두두스나 랑가 디간은 로에 체도 두두스 배낭에 nga 단제베 토네 왕로슈 많이러버지 탕 가르치해베 이네체 아니 야 전주 심라 곰 밀리지바다 땅 수름도 좀 가르치기네체 대주 창마 가르도도 슬랍도 잠베 니에기 등신들은 요도 되고도 수고를 때문에 용도 잠베 대다 탐정의 등신 되게 네 초로 두고도 슬랍데 토마르 잠바 가인바 디간 루어다 디만로체 토마르 잠야디 가르 장부 세도 잠베 타르베기 쳬르 잠가 제르데 이네 내가 제야디 샴바냐냐 제딩여선도 주도 잠베 미유당 참배기 최대 딱다준 로보요레스 아란졸 로카드네 제숨시 파토르고요 봐 세상에 어디셔게 당마디 아니 내가 가르쳐야be 이나요 고 당보 주버디 아니 내가 가르쳐야be 그도 네가 누구도 누구면도 양내양도 따져 채고레스 디바 고잡야 샴바진 고조되어서 루치유요 말레스 어디 가는 게 유세다 두스타두 앞에제 리치도 담배 따다 다시 제공도 두죄디 아니 배제 저거다 딜레 마지네 도마리 양단당 아주 숑 양한테 줘도 봐 야 슈마야 저거들래 제토야지다 아니 개치슈도 그런 저 단대 슈글레라고 이 마음발야 트란즈 라마도 춘제도 슈 가르치에베 이나양 아니 심그 수르지가 나로라야 아니 당기 곰불루르기 제보 대저 상불 숨는 신체 아니 다 개원도비 체도 세대 동네 탐제기 용사기 아니 자와럽디 개와들이 개원도비 체도 최대 쉬고요 세나 신체 개와디 도비 체도 내게 아니 가리네 저와디 땅도 가지고 고도스 냠네 가리네 체도 가지고 고도스 너무 잡사디가 잡이나 단다디 토마르 잠바 카인바 안 당부 다랑 두부지 현고 그뒤네 견사부들이 간 로디기로 봐 어디 내가 전부 인설해 오도시에 따다네 디 저버들인데 대샤 주치 대닝고 칼라드사 얘네 주준이도 시작이야 도로 봐
So here, in terms of the question was in relation to verse 12, where the person was asking, particularly where it says about. So we should say
right,
this.
Simon, do you need a clarification about the question?
No, I got it.
All right.
I got it. Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't. Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, so it's in verse 12 where it says that when you encounter the causes of happiness and these always persevere, but specifically the questioner is asking about the next lines where it says, whichever task you take up first, address this task primarily. In this way, you ensure the success of both tasks, where otherwise you accomplish neither. So what the questioner was really asking is this sort of having two completely separate kind of goal? Does this mean starting out with one goal and then developing a completely separate kind of goal? Or does it mean that the goal is the same, but we start doing a particular practice towards that goal and then we sort of change to a different practice. So that's the sort of way that the questioner was asking the question. And then I would say to that when we talk about sort of aims or goals, then there are many sort of stages to that. So, for instance, the goal of attaining the fully omniscient state of the fully enlightened state of the an omniscient Buddha, and then of course then in relation to that sort of goal, then many things are required. There's a whole series, a sequence of um, states of mind that we need to cultivate in order to achieve that goal. So, for instance, we need to develop bodhicitta. But in order to develop bodhicitta, then we have to develop compassion before that. And before we develop compassion, we also really need that sense of renunciation, the wish to be liberated from our suffering. And then in order to achieve that goal, we need to practice ethical discipline. And then, as we'd mentioned before earlier, even the sort of the basic form of sort of ethical discipline is looking at what the negative sides, the harmful sides of engaging in negative actions are, and understanding what those negative sides are in terms of both oneself and others. And so all of these minds we have to sort of take responsibility for. We have to take hold of them in order to achieve the final aim, the final stated aim. And in terms of ethical discipline, we sort of and therefore right at that basis, when we're looking at ethical discipline, looking at what the benefits are of maintaining our ethical discipline, and looking at the sort of disadvantages, the negative sides of when we don't maintain that ethical discipline. And so then we start sort of making effort in the process of reducing our attachment and not getting involved in the 8 worldly concerns. So even if we, drawing it down to that level of practice where we're making effort to reduce attachment, avoid the 8 negative action and 8 worldly concerns, and also sort of basing our Dharma practice in this way of, ethical discipline, even at that level. And then we sort of go off and do some other kind of Dharma practice, which isn't related into that sequence at all. It's not sort of driving into the same kind of purpose, but we go off and do something. It may be a Dharma practice, but it may be completely unrelated and not really in the context or in the sort of path of what we've been doing before. Then that's what it's sort of referring to when it says, whichever task you take up first, address this task primarily. So it should go into the same sort of direction. It's sort of all being directed into the same purpose. So, for instance, in Tantra, we take initiations, then we may do sort of recitation, mantra recitation practices in relation to Tantra in terms of the Bodhisattva path and developing bodhicitta. We may cultivate that to mind, the awakening mind, and also even in terms of achieving liberation and understanding the harm that self-grasping, looking at the effects of self-grasping and understanding whether they harm us or not, and trying to understand the negative sides of self-grasping, and understanding that it's not okay for us to allow our self-grasping to just run away with itself, and therefore start to sort of seek for liberation by getting away from our self-grasping. But all of what Atiśa is saying to us here is that all the aim, whatever practices we're doing, and whatever aim, the sort of final aim or main focus of final aim we have, they have to be in accord with each other. So they have to be sort of connected in an accord with each other. And so Atiśa is advising us here to check again and again, whether what we are doing as Dharma practice is actually going in that direction or not. And not sort of getting halfway with it. We start out on a particular direction or path or goal, the methods to do that, and then sort of not give up part of the way along it and start to do something else. So that's really what is being said here, is that not to go off and do something which is completely in out of context with what we actually do, what we're actually aiming for. So I'm not sure if my answers here to these questions have been exactly, exactly point directly to the answer that you're looking for, but this is be the last of the question and answer sessions, and in the afternoon we'll be finishing off the text. So one important thing to do is, in terms of the Dharma teachings that were given in the letter to a king, to Dechin Sambo, the king by Nagarjuna, he's saying you have to continually ask this question. Suffering, all of our suffering comes from birth. In order to turn back and eliminate that birth, then are we doing the things that we're doing again and again? Are they connecting to that main purpose? And the danger is that we do things which are away from that main purpose. So that's what is being said in the text here. There's no sound. So the mandala offering.